Hey everyone, we're live today with Max from Valence Zone. Also, Time Wave Labs, right? I always had the confusion between Valence and Time Wave, but absolute privilege to be joined by Max. Absolute geniuses building some incredible things. So welcome, Max.
Yeah, Simon, great to be here. Yeah, it's a real pleasure. Just to sort of clear up that confusion, I mean, it's a very simple differentiation. TimeWave is just our software development company. It's our legal entity, and it's Valence that is the protocol, the tech stack that we're building.
Nice. Okay, makes sense. So it's kind of like the labs. The labs is the Time Wave.
Exactly, TimeWave Labs.
Makes sense. So, I mean, to kick off, like, let's start maybe with yourself. Like, if you can introduce yourself and sort of your background and where you come into the picture, and then we'll move into like what is TimeWave, what is Valence.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, myself, like I've been an entrepreneur for almost my entire life. I studied finance at Wharton, went on to become a management consultant, mostly in financial services. So I worked with some of the world's largest banks and financial institutions, and I saw how difficult and messy a lot of things could be. And when I heard about Ethereum in 2017, the idea of smart contracts just immediately clicked with me. And this was 2017, so crypto, like Bitcoin, only been around for like what was that, like 9 years. I'm like, I'm a fast learner. I find this stuff fascinating. Let me figure it out. And one of the very first things I did was like, why is anyone going to believe that I know what I'm talking about when I'm talking about crypto? So I ended up writing like a half white paper, half investment memo on both Cosmos and Polkadot at the time, on why I thought this idea of the internet of blockchains was like so cool and the right way to go about it. And yeah, that was kind of like my calling card. Like, and since then I've done just about everything there is to do in crypto. I traded, I invested, I advised, operated, built. And then 3 years ago, I was like, I think I'm ready to start my own thing. And what do I think is like the biggest opportunity? And I thought that just something in the space of monetary policy, like bonds, debt, and blockchain interoperability, something there was going to be huge. So why don't I just like start tinkering around there, see what happens? And at least for me, like the first thing I did, I just started building an Olympus style clone in Cosmwasm. And I was like, oh, the Olympus, it's really cool. It has these cool mechanisms. It's about reserve currency, bonds. Let me apply that into the Cosmos context where like I never really saw that becoming like the true new world reserve currency because it was so dependent on Ethereum. What would a cross-chain version of that be? What would a version of that like exists on many chains look like? And that led me to meet a lot of the core Cosmos guys who liked what I had to say. They invited me to co-author the Cosmos Hub white paper, which I did, and it was a blast. I learned about what the limits of blockchain interoperability are today, at least back then. And like with IBC, it's really cool. You can bridge assets from one place to another, and you can bridge it back, but you can't do that programmatically. You can't do it persistently. And nobody actually wants to bridge assets, right? What they want to do is on the other side of that bridge, which is to buy or sell or lever or get yield or whatever it is. And so the basic idea was like, let's enable programmable interoperability across these blockchains. Let's not build a new bridge. Let's build on top of existing bridges and increase that functionality and enable people to build cross-chain applications. And as we build this tech stack that makes it easy for others to build cross-chain applications, let's build the first few of those ourselves to demonstrate what's possible. So, yeah, more I could go into that, but that's the high level.
Yeah, it's really cool. It took me a while to properly understand it, so I started really digging into the tech and into the documentation. But then it's like, okay, this makes sense. It's quite cool, and I think it's really fitting to where the space is going, which is really about abstraction. It's like users don't want to, as you said, don't want to swap. They don't want to go and use 10 different blockchains. They want to be able to use applications that push this into the background, right? Where it's happening behind the scenes without the users have to know. So for applications, being able to build that faster and better is definitely an improvement. But so obviously you started with Ethereum. How did you first, I guess, find out about crypto, and how did that sort of journey come in? Like, were you exposed from like the really technical part? Did you start trading coins and you're like, actually the tech's really cool behind this? Like, how did it come in? Because I think everyone's got their different entry points to the space of how they discover it, how they get in, and sometimes there's an evolution and a journey once you're already in the space.
Yeah, I had a pretty fun trip down the rabbit hole. So, I mean, I remember it was like March, April or so of I think it was pretty fairly early in 2017, and someone had just messaged me like, "Hey, did anyone get in on Ethereum before it was too late?" And I was like, "Oh, what's Ethereum?" And I checked this out. It gone from like $40 to 400 over the course of like a couple months, and I was like, "Oh wow, this was cool. What did I miss?" And I started looking into it, and I was like, "Whoa, this is really neat!" Like, I didn't understand Bitcoin, even though I encountered that back in 2011, because like my Wharton professors were telling me the Fed was great, even though these YouTube videos were telling me the Fed was bad, and I just didn't really get into it. But smart contracts and programmable money I thought was fascinating. And that trip, that friend, I went on a trip with him to Iceland and a few other friends, and a different friend in that group like brought some white papers of like Filecoin and 0x and a few others. And I was just like so nerd sniped by all this stuff. I was like, so new. I don't have a background in computer science, but like I'm just learning this piece by piece, and it's just so fun, so interesting. And like the first crypto I actually bought was Litecoin, and it's because we just played a bunch of like fun games, and like I lost one of these card games, and the loser had to buy Litecoin because we none of us understood.
Litecoin was promising at the time, right? Like it was like the faster, cheaper Ethereum.
Yeah,
You know,
it
there's
was
like
it
the
was the
transfers.
silver. It was a silver to Bitcoin's gold, and all of us were like, "What the heck does that mean?"
But I
And
always used it. Honestly, I used Litecoins for transfers a lot of the time. I think I used Litecoin. Like there was a point where we were using Litecoins for transfers because it was faster and cheaper than using Ethereum. It was like I think it was the gas was really high on Ethereum, and you had like whenever you had the choice between using like Litecoin or Ethereum, I would choose Litecoin to do transfers. It was really interesting.
yeah. So yeah, that was the first crypto I bought. And when I got back, I wasn't really enjoying my TradFi job very much, and so I was kind of like looking for what I wanted to do next. And I wanted to be an investor, and I quickly realized that the best deals were going towards like you need to have a reason to be on the cap table in order to get the best allocation. And so I was like, okay, like how do I get that allocation? And I was like, oh well, like first let me make sure people know that I know what I'm talking about. And so I was like, okay, what would be a good thing for me to write about to like, learn and also demonstrate my knowledge? And I was just like listening to every podcast, reading every paper I could find. And I remember there was one podcast where I think it was like either Olaf or Ryan Zer from like some sort of polychain podcast where they're talking about Cosmos and Polkadot. And I hadn't heard about either of those, so I researched them both. They both call themselves the Internet of Blockchains, and at the time, I had no idea what that meant, and I had no idea what the difference was between them, and I didn't see any good answers as answering this question. We didn't. This was pre Chat GPT, right? So I just start like listening to podcasts from Jay and Ethan Buckman and Gavin Wood, and I read the pink paper and the white paper, like all the stuff. And I write this paper on Cosmos and Polkadot, why I think both of them are really like cool. And by the end of it, like I was just so sold on crypto. It was too late to participate in the Cosmos Hub ICO, but there was time to participate in DOT, and like that ended up 160xing, you know. So um,
Wow.
it's definitely taught me to trust my thesis, even when it might be a little ahead of the curve.
Yeah, that's huge. So obviously, Accelerate till now, Valence protocol started as your Time Wave Labs. What your how long did you have this vision that you currently have, like for Valence? So obviously, Time Wave Labs, maybe like obviously we're talking about like this a bit of the mission of like the interoperability, uh, being able to build these apps. Maybe start with the long term vision where you see this going and what you see this looking like, and then maybe we break down like the different components. Did it evolve over time? Did it start at what it is being built, what is being built today, or did it kind of start as different and then evolve?
Yeah, so almost exactly 3 years ago, I'd left my last startup, and it was just me. You know, like what am I going to do with my life now? And I was like, okay, well, I want to work on something that has the potential to be the work of my life. You know, something that I find intrinsically interesting, that I can get paid for, that the world needs. You know, that ikigai, that intersection of all of that. And so I basically started like, what do I think is what are my interests? You know, my interests have been entrepreneurship, finance, and technology. Those have been like consistent throughout my life. And then I was like, okay, well, like, how do I what is the intersection of those in a space that I think is really promising, so that if I build something there, if I build close enough to the money river, I can't help but getting wet, right? So where
Mhm.
is that? And that's when I thought about monetary policy and bonds and blockchain interoperability. And that's where I saw like the whole Olympus style thing being cool, and starting to build my own Cosmos implementation of that. But when I got the chance to co-author the Cosmos Hub white paper, I got to talk with some of the creators of IBC. Like I got to speak with these like really smart people, and just surround myself with these really, really great people, and learned what was possible, what the limitations were. And I shifted my idea a little bit. So like, hey, I pretty much now have the Cosmos Hub as my first customer. Like, here are some ideas. How would I apply these ideas for the Cosmos Hub? And that's what led to the paper. And when the whole Atom 2.0 debacle like failed, like I wasn't involved in the passage of it, the politics. Like I was just a co-author. When it failed, I was like, huh, like that's pretty rough for you guys, but that's kind of really good for me, because now I have an excuse to not build this in a Cosmos Hub specific way, but to build this in a way that's applicable to all of crypto, including Ethereum and Solana and Move and anywhere else. And so after that, I basically went to my co-authors, Sam and Udit. I'm like, guys, co-authoring a paper is cool. I like research, but I think that commercializing this would be even cooler. Like let's take this all the way across the line. And so we got together, we got on a weekly call, and we just had some ideas of like, what are some early applications of this idea of programmable blockchain interoperability that could be like our start. Where do we begin with this? And we were shopping some ideas around, and then we came across our first customer, Stride, and Stride was doing a deal with the Cosmos Hub where they're borrowing some Atom, and the only way for the hub to lend that Atom to Stride was with a multisig. And so Stride paid us to build a way for the Cosmos Hub to lend liquidity to Stride without a multisig. So we did that, and then the hub was doing
that's the covenants, right? That was
exactly,
the covenants.
And then the hub was doing all these other liquidity deals with protocols that didn't have any security relationship with it, like Osmosis and Persistence and others. And so Atom Accelerator DAO paid us our next one, which was to build a more generalized version of covenants that can handle these other liquidity deals that the hub was doing without a multisig. And like today, it's gone even further, where most of those deals have been clawed back and are in Hydro. And what is powering Hydro to deploy liquidity from one blockchain to another, that's powered by Valence today. It's kind of like a reformulation, rebranding of the interchain allocator from that original paper. So
yeah, I saw that. I saw like the way that they've built that, and it's kind of interesting how that was like the Atom 2.0's vision, right? Kind of, and it's just kind of I guess took a different route through Hydro. So that's super interesting, and that's a good first case study, I guess, of the application, or one of the first case studies of that application.
Exactly. It's actually kind of interesting. So even though we built a lot of this stuff for the Cosmos Hub was so slow to upgrade that it's actually Neutron that was the first user of our stuff. And so Neutron, it's a permissionless WASM chain, and it's a new ecosystem, right? And so how do you attract new protocols? Usually what you do is like you give grants, but when you give the grant away and like they spend it down, and once it's gone, like the project will often leave. What's the incentive to stick around? And so we worked with Neutron. We're like, hey, we have a more capital efficient way of you to attract protocols. And so instead of giving things away as a grant, why don't you lend your liquidity? Why don't you lend your Neutron and say, hey, like Mars, like we'll put in, call it $500,000 worth of our native token Neutron. If you put in $500,000 worth of Mars, together we can create $1 million worth of like Neutron Mars LP on the Neutron DEX Astroport. And it's super capital efficient. Like now people have a more efficient trading pair. If Mars ever leaves, Neutron can reclaim it. It's much more capital efficient. We did 4 of these bilateral protocol owned liquidity deals with Neutron, and like we've done that, which has been great. We've also now that we've sort of saturated Cosmos, we're now expanding into Ethereum and enabling some cross chain there. But yeah, every step of the way, it's been very organic, one step at a time. What do our customers need? What is a common thing that can satisfy multiple people at the same time? And these covenants, they're very hard to build. There's so many things that could go wrong. It took us like months and like a lot of money to make it happen. And so what we did is like, instead of handling each of these bespoke routes individually, we took a step back and we're like, let's build infrastructure and makes it really easy for us to handle all sorts of routes. So if someone wants to introduce a new chain or a new DeFi protocol or a new ecosystem, new anything, we can do that in a matter of minutes, not in a matter of months. And that's where Valence is today, this universal DeFi computer, where if you want to do any sort of programmable automation, especially any sort of DeFi action from any chain to any chain, that's how we got there.
Yeah, it's really cool. Like that works with having specific libraries, and you can basically write libraries pretty rapidly, and it sort of plugs in, and then you get this kind of compiling of all these different libraries that can be used as like sort of these Lego blocks, right? That can be pieced together to create cool things.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So to give people an idea, like before, each of these routes were like this like custom bespoke bridge is from the hub to Stride to Neutron doing one specific thing. But now we've built this what's effectively a computer, you know. So if you want to engage with any sort of DeFi protocol that Valence has already done something with, you don't actually need to write a single line of smart contract code. Like you just need to fill in like a config file that says, I have this asset here, I want it to go there, then here, then here, then here. And then we have a program manager, like you think of it as like a mini microchip, you know, like a mini program that will like read that config file and then launch co-processors to whichever chain actually needs to handle that cross-chain that cross-chain process. So the first time you use a new protocol like Aave or something, it might take a few hours, a day to build that library. But once that library is in there, now every other library, every other bridge, every other chain, every other ecosystem, like it's at your fingertips. So there's some really strong network effects here in terms of like, why would you build anywhere else and have to build this from scratch when you just come here? The libraries are there. If there's like some small change that you want for your specific thing, it's easy to build it yourself. You just add a library, stick it on, like you were saying, like a Lego block.
Yeah, I was joking about this before the call of like how, you know, we're working with you guys and like it's sort of like we built the same code in parallel. It was sort of like the devs shipped something and we're like, oh, Valence shipped at the exact same time. We're like, well, like what you're using more from Valence because it makes sense. The code's already there. And so it's more becomes about filling in the pieces of like, how do we take this infrastructure, which is meant to be more universal, and then, you know, write our own libraries using Valence and sort of integrate elements. Like we have security elements to add into, we have rebalancing strategy managers, everything with Orbit. But like this is really cool because you guys kind of write the thing that is applicable to sort of like a template that's applicable to a lot of different protocols, and then those protocols can add to the libraries and build on, and then you get more of you get a bigger library of code that can be used by new applications. So it's kind of really cool how that sort of spreads in terms of this like available code that enables people to build more. And then once you've got the tech stack, it really becomes about new different ways of doing things, which is like distribution mechanisms and the way that you interpret that technology and change it and make it different and more interesting, rather than everybody being focused on competing infrastructure, which is like, I think is really interesting. Like if you have to rebuild everything from scratch all the time, you're like, I got to rebuild this here. We're actually wasting energy focusing on that rather than how do we actually, you know, simplify this? How do we make this adopted? How do we do this and this and this and all these interesting things? So that's really cool. So what do you see as the main, I guess, the main, not protocols, or the main like applications with Valence? Like obviously you mentioned that you're building these like, I guess, generic templates for how things are done. I've seen like, obviously the cross-chain vaults, like the X vaults. What are the kind of other things that you see Valence sort of sitting in that are really interesting? I saw Neutron is doing some stuff with Mercury on Valence. I'm just really interested to dig into that side of things.
Yeah, so maybe we'll touch on like what we're doing, you know, what's in production today, and then like where we're going. So what we've done is like I mentioned, those unilateral POL deals where the hub just unilaterally deploys liquidity. We've been doing some bilateral protocol and liquidity deals where the Neutron puts in half and some counterparty puts in half. So we've done those. We've also helped Neutron just make more of with its treasury. You know, its treasury was just kind of sitting dormant in a wallet somewhere, and it's trying to get a DeFi ecosystem off the ground. And so we helped Neutron as a blockchain strategically deploy Neutron to its DEX, to its lending protocol, to liquid staking, to help get that flywheel going. So that was another use of Valence. And so I think these are all cool. I'd love to continue doing these, but like these are all like ultra hard mode, right? And so what I liked about starting there, of like doing protocol to protocol stuff, is that if we can do that it's much faster and easier for us to do almost anything else. And so we've done that. We've nailed it. And now we're looking for like, okay, cool. We've sort of done this, but we don't want this to be some sort of neat science experiment. Like, look, we built this thing. Like, I'm looking for this to be a really successful protocol, something a lot of people use, adds a lot of value, so that this can be like a really successful business for everyone involved, right? And so where we're going, we have two prongs. One is the crypto native prong, and the other one is like the less crypto native prong. Where everyone we've worked with so far, they've been blockchains, protocols, dApps, DAOs, and the crypto native prong is like continue doing that. Now that we have our Ethereum integration, we're talking with Enzyme and a few other like DeFi protocols in EVM world of what's possible there. But like I'm also speaking with like TradFi organizations, and they just want high risk adjusted returns. They don't really care where it comes from. Where I'm talking to agentic AI protocols, where what if these agents want to pursue cross chain strategies? Like it would be great if Valence was the backend for that. We're talking with some neobanks to help enable them to be more crypto native. So there are a lot of places that this can go. But the next thing that we're currently working on is something that both of those prongs are looking for, which is cross-chain leveraged yield. The situation is that there are a lot of people who hold blue chip assets like Bitcoin or ETH, and they want yield on those assets. A really common way to get yield on blue chip assets like that is to borrow against them, borrow stables against them, and use those stables to get yield somewhere. But the problem is that the best place to get leverage is often different than the best place to get yield. So like with wrapBTC, for example, the best place to get leverage often is on Aave, on ETH mainnet. But the best place to get yield changes pretty often. Sometimes it's bearer chain, sometimes it's base, it moves around.
It's like arbitrage, right? So it's like lending and borrowing arbitrage that you're looking to do is kind of borrow. Yeah.
Exactly. So what we're in the process of building right now is giving people the ability to deposit your wrapBTC on, I think we're doing wrapped ETH, right? Deposit wrapped ETH on ETH mainnet. That's all you have to do. Once you do that, you're done. After that, Valence will then take that wrapped ETH, send it to Aave v3, borrow at like 50% LTV or some variable LTV to get stables, bridge those stables to an L2. I think the first one we're doing is going to be base. Once you're on base, deposit those stables, either half those stables and half the WETH on a DEX to provide liquidity for the WETH USDC pair, or some other yield generating opportunity. And then off chain, you could monitor it. How's the health of this doing? Like I want to automatically withdraw it if the health factor ever reaches a certain LTV. As more strategies are available, if like the yield gets higher somewhere else on base, move it somewhere else on base. If it gets higher on a different chain, move it to a different chain. There's a lot of extensibility that can go from here, but the core product, the core offering here is cross-chain leveraged yield. Like get the best rates on borrowing, no matter what chain you're on, and get the highest yield no matter what chain that's on, and you choose your risk profile.
There's a lot of sort of interesting points with that. Like I guess like one of the big things is just the ability to do the monitoring and the rebalancing fairly quickly with this, right? Especially when you've got like leverage involved in the process. Although like you're dealing with blue chip assets, so you've kind of got more buffer. But that's super interesting. Like we've dug into a lot of this stuff with Orbit, but away from the leverage side of things, mostly due to wanting to keep it more, I guess, on the more on the conservative side. Even though there's like a lot of opportunities with leverage in the market, that's really cool. And honestly, like this is the kind of stuff that Valence enables even Orbit to do, right? Like it when we started building a lot of like the infrastructure components ourselves, and then we talked to Spade from Neutron, who's like talked to the Valence guys that are already building some of this stuff in parallel. We're like, well, okay, it makes sense that if we can work with Valence, we can accelerate the development of some of these infrastructural backend pieces and focus more on some of the other areas, which is strategies, which is distribution, which is application side of things. Right. Obviously, there's a lot of like libraries and stuff that we need to build to tailor what you guys are building towards what we're actually creating. But it's really cool that like we're kind of going in that same direction, and we can, accelerate that development and create like a killer product. So I think that's really cool.
Yeah.
And I guess, oops, sorry.
I was just gonna say what's been great about working with you guys is that a lot of times, like we're looking around corners, we're solving problems that people don't yet know they are going to have or already have. And so speaking with you has been really great. Like you've looked around those corners, you know, you've encountered those problems and you have like really high agency. So you just went in ahead and like tried to start building this stuff. But yeah, like we've already built this infrastructure that makes it so fast and so easy for us to accommodate new things. Like it just wouldn't make sense for you to go on the side quest to build what is our main quest, right? So we're happy to help in situations like this.
Yeah, and what happens with that is it means more focus and energy can go into solving some of the things that you guys are more generalized for, right? So if you guys are building more like infrastructure, there's a lot of like product related problems to solve from the user experience side and from the way that applications are built using this infrastructure. And there's also a lot of like, I guess, business development and things like we talk to institutions, we're talking to all these players, and they tell us things that, you know, as we're having these conversations that they want or that, you know, they're interested in. It's like a partner might want to integrate us, but they have these requirements. And so then it comes in and we go, is that built through Orbit? Is that built through, you know, like sort of more, as you're doing with Valence, a more custom part of it. So that's really interesting for talking to the end users and the customers a lot. But as I mentioned before the call, there were specific things with the way that tech is built. When you build like the generalized, it's like, okay, well, this is the way it's built. We talk about like withdrawal queues and things like that. It's like, okay, you guys have built these things to react to handling all these cross-chain protocols and withdrawals and all this sort of stuff. We're having to take that and use that in really creative ways to go, how do we make an experience seamless for the end user? Like, how do we make withdrawals immediate? How do we make like the end user, if you're a retail user and you want to withdraw money from the protocol, how do we make this instant so you don't have to wait, you know, 6 hours, all this sort of stuff. So it's just kind of taking those Lego pieces and playing around with them and figuring out ways that we can kind of get creative. And, you know, sometimes it's writing our own libraries. It's like you guys have like the redemption rate, like updates every period of time. So we need to go in and we need to like call the rewards more often, or we need to like accelerate it. But then we have to factor in gas. And so there's a whole range of different things that go into it. But it's been really fun. And I feel like I should actually probably talk to you more about this as we go through it, because it helps you guys look at sort of the way that we're thinking about things and the way that we're playing around with certain edge cases that come up that might be outside of the tech realm, which is like a user edge case of like, well, if this happens, then this is a problem on the user side.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, all of that also, like, what if the user has an asset on a certain chain and like you want to save them the hassle of having to bridge that asset and do things from like a certain thing? Like, we can also abstract the chains away, you know, give users this most seamless possible experience. So no matter where their assets are, it's really easy for them to get into Orbit. But yeah, you're also right in that the design space for this is massive. You know, we've made a bunch of design decisions on what we think is going to be most generally applicable to most cases, but we've made it highly flexible so that if people do want to change certain things, it's also very possible. So we love when people come and tell us like, hey, like your tech can't do this thing that we needed to do. Great, like now we know what to prioritize for our roadmap.
And the product design is so interesting. It must be really fun for you guys as well. Like you have like the infrastructure elements, but there's the product modeling element, which one of my favorite things actually is digging into like problem solving of going, okay, well, this is the problem that we're facing with, you know, whatever it is. It's like, okay, we need to build this vault, and here are the 10 edge cases that come up if you do it this way. And it's kind of like, I don't know if there's a term for it. Like it's a model thinking of like, okay, well, there's all these edge cases that pop up. How do we handle these edge cases? And so you start adding layers in, or you start removing layers, and you figure out exactly how to handle that problem in the best way possible using the tech you have available. And I feel like that's actually one of the most fun things of building from a product perspective, which is like, this is what the user wants, and this is how we have to build it. And you have to kind of navigate all these routes to figure out the best way to build this specific thing.
Yeah, navigating routes is a great way of putting it. Like big shout out to our partner Neutron for like giving us having the patience for us to like really invest in this infrastructure that makes it easy to like handle net new things. You know, if we were handling this one at a time, like each new thing would take us months, and it just we would never ever get there. But by like thinking through like what is infrastructure necessary that'll make it as fast as possible for time when someone comes to us with like some crazy cross-chain thing, to us being able to deliver that in a safe, secure, reliable way. And so we're just like constantly working on getting that down. And because like as a startup, like we're going through the idea maze, like making those decisions, and there's so many unknown unknowns that like how do you build your infrastructure, your product in a way that's maximally flexible, so that as the market changes, as taste changes, as needs change, like you can adapt and you're not too rigid. But at the same time, you take an opinionated enough bet where like you're not just building something so abstract that like to actually apply that infrastructure to anything remotely practical or profitable, it's going to take you forever. Like it's that balancing act has been probably the primary art of what we're doing.
You need like these test cases, right? I think it's like brilliant the way you guys did it, because you're kind of working with your initial customers to build that kind of the MVP, which is very custom and it's very hard and hands-on. But once you've got that, it's like, okay, well, we've built this MVP. Here's some use cases, what you can do with it. And I think that's helped us a lot, because I think in the early stages when I first discovered Valence, it was quite abstract, right? There was a lot of there was the covenants. I was like, what can you do with these covenants? It's like, okay, now there's some like examples of how you can use it. And then, when we're going into like the libraries and the stuff with the aggregation, I was like, okay, well, where do we actually use this? Like, where does this fit into the picture? Numerous calls with the devs was like, where's it going? And then what are we doing? And it was like, at the first point, it was like, okay, well, it's just going to work. The libraries are going to work for the execution. But, you guys didn't have like the coprocessor or Neutron or any of this sort of stuff. So we're like, okay, we're going to have to build our own, build the coprocessor. We're going to have to do all these like different elements. And then as you guys have moved forward, like, it's like, okay, I think we talked about this with Max. We were like, we need to have something that like we don't deal with. I think it was like an off-chain element for like the redemption price. And we're like, there's too much risk in that for us. So, we're going to have to come in and build this coprocessor, like this coprocessor, and then you guys already built it. You guys went off and delivered this thing that we were going to build. It's just like, okay, that saved us like sort of the time within like building that thing. So I think that's really cool, because you get to kind of iterate, and then you get all these test cases, and then when you go to the market, you can actually go to a partner from the BD front and be like, well, you're building this, you could actually use this, this, and this, and they've got like tangible examples they can use, and I think that really, really helps when it comes to using the technology.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. I mean, having people actually use the tech is the best way for us to get feedback. And I would say one of the biggest things we're working on is becoming more approachable. This stuff it's very complicated stuff. Like I'm sitting with my team all the time, and like I'm still learning how this works, what's going on. Like communicating this out, has been a high enough priority for us. But we're changing that now. That's why I'm on here. It's why we're tweeting a bit more about what's going on. But because like so far, our customers have been like leaders of blockchains, dApps, and DAOs. Like we're in DMs with them, so we're just talking with them the same way we're in some Telegram chats with you, like helping guide you. But the average person who's like, hey, how do I use Valence to make money? How do I use Valence to build something cool? Our docs are really great from a super detailed protocol level, but they're not the most like welcome to Valence, like hello world.
Yeah.
But
they're comprehensive. I tell you from our devs, like when like they go through the docs, they don't have any questions for you guys. It's like super clear. Like I was like, guys, could you interact with the devs? Like, can you interact with the Valence guys in the chat? It's like, we don't need to. I'm like, but like it'd be good to do that, right? Like just tell them what we're building so there's some alignment. But they're just like it's like we're pretty clear on what we have to do and what's everything's going on. So it's like that's at least for the builders, that's quite an ups to the docs you guys have built.
Yeah. So I am very proud of that. And we are now going to start coming out with products that like someone doesn't need to know anything about the code to use. They just have money and they want to make a leverage bet. This cross-chain leverage yield. We're going to be coming out with things that enable them to do that. So wherever you are in this stack, from like uber hardcore protocol nerd to just like degen, we're going to have something for you.
Oh man, that opens up some ideas. What would be really freaking cool? I'm sure you guys already thought of this. Like, what if you had like vibe coding on top of Valence, which is like you have AI plugged in, and they could actually like build your protocol. It's use the underlying tech stack, but you don't have to really.
It's really funny you say this, because like one of our co-founders, Sam, who you've been speaking with, like he's pretty much our chief vibe coder, and so he's already doing it in house. He's been using it to sort of look into the future of like where the Valence architecture is going to go as we incorporate ZK and as we make a few different changes. But yeah, I mean, that also is pretty synergistic with some of the agentic AI conversations we've been having around like, hey, like let's have Valence be the tech stack that your agents use to do cross-chain things. Like, sure, your agents can do different things on different chains at the same time, but what if they want that to happen atomically? What if they want that to happen with a like certain like provable constraints? We can enable that. So yeah, maybe a vibe coding Valence hackathon is should be on the docket.
What interests me about this the most as a non-dev is I know the limitations somewhat of the current state of AI, which like I wouldn't trust a dev to use fully AI generated code, for smart contracts or anything like that. Like we talk about this internally, like labeling what code is auto generated, what isn't, so that it can be tweaked. But like I think about this as like if you guys have these modules already built, right? And it's kind of like you got a library of these modules that can be plugged together in different interesting ways. What if you basically gave the AI limitations on not generating new code, but essentially piecing it together in new ways, which you've already done with the I can't remember the term that you mentioned, but the thing where you write like the code and it uses
the config file.
The config file, right? It's so interesting in my mind how if you can give it those kind of limitations, which is like it can't generate new code, but it can use the libraries and the config files in really interesting ways. And I don't mean this, obviously you mentioned this with the agents and how they create new apps, but even for the end user, like you could be like, okay, other Max comes along and wants to build a smart, wants to build an application, a cross-chain application, isn't a coder, has access to these vibe coding tools that can build, web interfaces and like sort of basic stuff, probably wouldn't trust it fully on the smart contract side. But if you've got Valence plugged in and you've got all these modules in the background, it could just take those libraries, plug them together in interesting ways, mixed with the web front end, and create a whole new application for someone who doesn't code, right? And it doesn't have the limitations of vibe coding, which is like typically still at this stage, you need to be like a developer to do it because there's all sorts of problems still going on with that.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And to take that even a step further, so even if you already constrain it to only using our libraries, sometimes the libraries still have judgment within it. Like you're connected to Aave, but how much leverage do you take? At what point do you withdraw it so you don't get liquidated? There's still like additional constraints after choosing the libraries. And we're in the process of using some zero knowledge, some ZK tech to even further constrain this, where maybe you actually want your AI to run wild, like, hey, look at whatever you want, but I need you within these constraints. I need to know that you're going to withdraw if the LTV ever gets within 10% of the liquidation threshold, or I never want you to take more than 50% leverage, or like, here are the 10 vaults I'm whitelisting for you to rebalance between. You can't rebalance to a vault that isn't on those 10. There are additional constraints that you can do, how automated you want, how evolved you want. That's all flexible.
You should talk to him, Azam. I think you guys would have some brilliant ideas because he's always dropping ideas in my DM. He's like, we should build NPC into the vault, so we should do all these sort of crazy things. I'm like, let's put them in an idea bank and let's get the foundations done first. But it's like, like I think all these cool ideas that are becoming more and more possible, things you can deploy, and I love the concept there that you mentioned with like the limitations, because my trust of AI is still on the lower end in terms of like understanding that it still hallucinates, it still has challenges. So people are like, oh, you should build AI into your yield aggregator. I'm like, yeah, that sounds risky, But then there's more of these things coming up where you can add like predefined like rules or predefined things so you don't have some of these challenges.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's really cool, man. I think we're sort of coming to the end of our time because I know we had this scheduled for about 50 minutes, but I'm really interested to know Valence. Okay, so what are some? I mean, obviously we've covered a lot with this. Like we've covered like sort of the tech. What are some things that maybe we haven't mentioned that are really interesting or exciting for the future? Where you're looking to take this? What like I guess people can look forward to more regarding Valence in the next coming months?
Yeah. So I would say the biggest thing is like don't be afraid to get in touch with us. Like we're friendly. We our DMs are open. And we're always interested in knowing what people want to do cross-chain. We've built this really powerful tech that can do so many different cross-chain cross-chain things, like what are the things that people find most interesting? And I encourage people to think like beyond your chain, beyond your ecosystem, potentially even beyond just like crypto as people typically understand it. Like I view this as internet native finance. I think the lines between DeFi and TradFi are blurring. So I imagine your audience is pretty like Cosmos maybe native, crypto native. But if there's anyone else watching who is not really a dev, who isn't attached to a single ecosystem, maybe like even a TradFi person that it wants to get into crypto, think about like the sort of automations you would want so that like you as an individual asset manager can do the work of like an entire firm. Things that like the might be really intimidating to do alone. We could empower you to do that. We're already compatible with EVM. We have an SVM, so Solana integration in the works. We're planning going to move next. I think the cross-chain leveraged yields, like that'll probably be the next product that comes out where you won't need any sort of dev knowledge to just like interact and play around with that. So hope people find that fun. And yeah, I encourage people to get
exciting.
and
That's
get in touch.
exciting. Cross-chain leverage yield is exciting. It's yeah, that's gonna be really cool. And it's kind of, I think IBC is probably also really good for you guys, like the IBC Eurokey expansion. I know you guys have been building cross-chain stuff even without, I think, using Hyperlane, right? Even before Eureka.
Yeah, that's something that would probably be good to cover. So Valence, we have not built our own bridge. We are not competitive with bridges. Like we layer on top. We are complementary with bridges. And today we're compatible with IBC, Hyperlane, layer 0. It's just a library, you know. So if there's a bridge out there that you want to integrate, that's like maybe a few hours of work. And yeah, we sit on top of it and we extend the functionality. So instead of just fire and forget, like Valence is there to make sure it actually goes through, and then the moment it's on the other side, it does the thing that you actually want it to do. Because like we talked about, nobody actually wants to bridge. What they want to do is on the other side of that bridge, and that's what Valence enables people to do.
How does just one thing that kind of came up that was interesting, and I know you guys are more general purpose. How would you say Valence compares to like other? I guess they're kind of more positioned as yield aggregation infrastructure more per se, but like the like super forms of the world and the Vedas of the world, like where does Valence sit compared to those in terms of the way they operate? Because I know that they have elements similar to Valence, but they're more specific to like a vaults or specific deployments.
Yeah, that's a great question. So for us, like the core for us is cross-chain automation, programmable cross-chain automation. That's the core for us. But it's this like it's such a broad thing. You know, how do we package this into a way that people understand? So one of the first ways that we're packaging this tech is in the form of a vault. And so that packaging is this one use case, this demo it could be competitive with like a Veda or these other vaults. But really, like we would very gladly work, like we a partner for them, enable them to go cross-chain, enable them to offer cross-chain leveraged yields. Like we want to be the infrastructure provider, empowering them. Like maybe our own cross-chain vaults like become a product, like who knows? But our preference it would be to collaborate, because our main mission is cross-chain programmable automation. We want to be the universal DeFi computer across all of it.
Yeah, I feel you guys are in a similar niche, but they've taken a more niched approach, whereas you guys have taken a broader approach. Like if you look at the Super Vaults and Superform and Veda, they're kind of focusing on vault infrastructure automation, but more so very specific to like going to like a Lombard and building a cross-chain kind of vault with Lombard or someone else. Whereas I think you're thinking a lot beyond that of like, yes, we can help on that side and that application side of things, but we can actually go broader and build these really cool wide libraries that enable any kind of applications. So I think it's really cool, and I'm really excited to follow on the journey. Like as I said, we're in your docs a fair bit, so I see the direction you guys are moving in sort of real time. It's like, okay, you guys push this and this and this, and it's really exciting because it helps us to kind of ideate with like, as I said before, like the design space of how you've thought through things, which is like we have a lot of like these product design choices that we have to make as we design Orbit, right? Because we're looking to be cross-chain on the back end and cross-chain on the front end. So cross-chain on the front end is being able to deposit into the vault from Ethereum or Solana, while the vault is on Cosmos, while retaining the good user experience. On the other end, it's like aggregation of cross-chain strategies on the back end. And so you cross-chain at two ends. And so there's different design choices that has to go into this element, because when you're dealing with aggregation, you're dealing with deposits and withdrawals, right? It's like, okay, deposits are pretty easy, but there's this miniature design choices we have to make. So like the way we've designed it is to like be instantly liquid and to be really easy. So we have things like when someone deposits, we have to actually query all the yield on all the different venues to be able to give us the updated rate to essentially give the right amount of receipt, because we're using not shares, we're using like a receipt yield bearing stablecoin. And so we had to actually go, okay, we need to query all the rates, we need to update the rate, and then we need to issue the ARPS, we would need to issue the AUSDC with the correct updated rate at the right time, right? So you had this sort of thing going on in the background. And at the front end, when you were dealing with like instant like UX for withdrawal and deposits, if someone deposits on Solana, right, we, one of the choices was, okay, do we do like, we have a contract on Solana that issues shares to the end user, but then we can't have AUSDC being a lot like canonical, like it's not, the same AUSDC that's being issued if you're using these different models. And we need to get the updated rate from the hub before we can issue the end AUSDC on that rate. So it's like, it's up to date. So we're like looking at like different ways of doing it and brainstorming through the way you guys used, I think, queuing mechanisms and the way that we wanted to kind of change it. And it's been really fun and enjoyable to play around with these different like design choices from the user experience, because you can build stuff for like, we can build stuff with optimal tech, but like, does that take into account the user experience that we're trying to create? And so when you're trying to merge both, you have to like kind of use trade-offs and figure out like innovative ways to use the tech in a way that like can suit those user experiences. So it's not like, I feel like a lot of DeFi people are like, okay, it's a 3 days, you've got a 3-day lock period, or like they just add on these things because they need to for the design choices. But is that friendly to the retail users you're trying to serve or to the end users you're trying to kind of actually serve? So I think that's really interesting.
Yeah. It's so cool that you're doing this like advanced cross-chain stuff. We've thought about it on both ends. So yeah, if you ever have any questions on either end of that, like you know to hop into our chat.
I'll share our findings. I'll share the findings and the way that we're looking at it, because it might also be good for you guys in terms of like, okay, we thought of it through this way, but what if we add this on that helps to do X? So I think for me, it's been super enjoyable, as I said before, like just going through this whole process of trying to problem solve the user, mix the tech with the user, and really figure out how to make the tech available to the user. And I think that's what crypto and DeFi haven't done very well. It's like, okay, we're going to build cool tech, right? But they haven't user optimized it. So why we've still got clunky UX like MetaMask and all this sort of stuff, because everyone's like building for like optimum technology, but not figuring out how to take that and then empathizing with the end user and kind of how does that look from the end user where it's completely abstracted. So yeah, I look forward to keep building with Valence, and I think there's some really cool things we're going to do together. So I'm excited.
Yeah, I'm excited too. I mean, you're helping us inform our product roadmap, so keep us posted on what you need, and we'll see what we can do to make it happen.
Amazing. Well, we've got this video. This recording is, on YouTube. We'll have some clips as well. I'll send you a bunch of clips from this as well that you guys can use. And yeah, just really looking forward to seeing what you guys come up with and the products and the architecture you guys ship. So, Max, thanks for taking your afternoon, your evening to spend time on this call. And yeah, look forward to seeing more.
Okay. Yeah, we'll definitely be in touch. Take care, Simon.
Awesome, legend.